Brothers and sisters, morning to you all. And online brothers and sisters, morning to you all. Today we are on Numbers chapter 20. It's quite a milestone. Talk about the first generation leaders pass away. The first one, verse 1 told us that Miriam passed away. The fourth paragraph, 22, verse 22 to 29, then Aaron was dead too. These two leaders passed away, signify that the generation that left Egypt also passed away. The people who rebelled passed away. Even the leaders also passed away in order to fulfill the word God spoken over these people, this tribe. They will spend 40 years wandering in the wilderness. That's the word of God. And God will brought the new generation into the promised land, the land of Canaan. This chapter full of confrontation, challenges. The people still complained. Now let's read our scripture. We have our PowerPoint. First one. Okay. The title for today is Evil Emotions. It's also the emotion that may bring death. Basically, it means the emotion that brings us death. In the wilderness, everyone has our own emotion, sentiment. It's discomfort. We lack a lot of things. The people were emotional as well as the people. And the leaders will have to take on the emotions from the people. And they have to take the complaints from Korah and his and the 250 leaders who accompany him. Even though the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them, but still, before that, the older brother and older sister of Moses also accused Moses that, is the Lord not speaking to us? Is the Lord only speaking to you? That's when the Numbers chapter 12, when Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses. Basically they were saying, you are the youngest in the family, Moses. You have older brother, older sister, Moses. What makes you the only leader in the whole among all the people? God's choosing is interesting. David was the youngest in the family, remember? King David. Before Benjamin was born, Joseph was the youngest in the family. God chose us according to His destiny, how He created us. It's nothing to do the order of birth within the family, but yet we live in such habit. Miriam did save Moses when he was first born. He was supposed to be killed, right? So he put baby Moses in the basket and put in the river Nile. So she saw the Egyptian princess, was bathing, and then the princess was looking for a nurse, a babysitter for this a Hebrew woman to look after Moses, baby Moses. To nurse. So the princess, the Egyptian princess, wanted to find a Hebrew nurse to nurse baby Moses. So it seems like Moses was in debt to Miriam. So when Moses was facing Pharaoh, he was saying to Pharaoh, well, I'm ineloquent, I'm slow in speech. And then God said to Moses that, okay, I will get Aaron, your older brother, to be your mouthpiece. But then you will speak, Moses will speak to Pharaoh just like God, and then Aaron will pass on the word for you, speak for you. Basically, within this leadership of three, the trio that Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, they need one another. It's actually full of crisis when Moses became the only leaders. The crisis that causes because of the family background, challenges from other leaders, and the constant complaint of the people. I suppose it was really hard to be Moses. And then the Bible scriptures say that he was the most humble man on earth above everyone else. Well, it's not exaggerate. When Miriam and Aaron challenged his leadership, his authority, but he was the most humble man on the face of the earth. We must respect our authority. They take on pressures from all sides. And then Moses would complain, not complain, but would say to God, these people were, you brought them to earth. Why did I bring them on my shoulder? To Moses, he was not exaggerating. So it's something that is such a heavy burden, such a great responsibility. Day and night he toiled, he worked. Now we are on verse 1. Then the children of Israel came into the wilderness of Sin in the first month, and the people stayed in Kadesh, and Miriam died there and was buried there. So first month of which year? Do we know? First month of which year? According to Numbers chapter 33, and then in the verse 38 of Numbers chapter 33, then it says that it's the 40 years after they left Egypt. Remember, they were in the Kadesh before. In Kadesh, they sent out 12 spies to explore the land of Canaan. When the 10 spies came back, the 12 came back and 10 gave evil report. People complained they did not want to go up. That was Kadesh. And God said, 1 year for a day. 1 year for a day. So they spent 40 years in the land. Then that's why they spent 40 years in the wilderness. Because they spent 40 days, so one day for a year, they need to spend 40 years in the wilderness. Now in Numbers 33, that's the end of the 40 years in the first month. That's in the September and October in the Western calendar. That's the Jewish New Year. Depends on which the Jewish calendar in which period of time. It should be the New Year of Passover. A bit sidetracked. Now, after 40 years, they returned to Kadesh. When the rebellion of Korah and all these complaints happened within the 40 years. Now they return to Kadesh. It marked the end of the 40 years. That means they were preparing for a new cycle. Miriam died here. She was buried there, Kadesh. Well, it's quite straightforward in here. So Miriam died. How about Aaron and Moses? How did they feel? They didn't have time to. And then people start to complain. Remember, we talked about the ash of the red heifer. It's a grace outside grace, so that when you have a dead body in your household, that's in Numbers chapter 19. Because of this water of purification, you sprinkle the water on the third day of their death. And then on the seventh day, they will be cleansed. They will be cleansed spiritually. So, a simple mourning for the dead takes about 7 days, quite normal. On the third day, you need to sprinkle the water of purification on the dead body. On the seventh day, the people, not the dead body, sorry, the people, the family. And then on the seventh day, the people will be clean. If we are a wee bit interested in Hebrews, there is an in. Basically, in verse 1, and they came to Kadesh, and Miriam died, and was buried there. Well, the English did have it, so it's quite obvious. But for the Chinese, it's not quite obvious. That's why Pastor HK is trying to make it clear. Basically, Miriam's death happened at the same time when they got no water to drink. So you can imagine Moses and Aaron, they just lost their older sister, and they still have to face the complaint of the people. But because they had no water for the congregation, so they gathered together against Moses and Aaron. That's verse 2. And then the verse 3 is the content of the argument. If only we had died when our brethren died before the Lord. Verse 3. Do not take it too serious, this line. Do not take them in, even if they speak directly at you. Do not take it to heart. Please don't. If only we had died when our brethren died before the Lord. Then why did they complain when there was no water? Then they just died without water, died of thirst. No big deal. They argue when there was no water. So they don't want to die, do they? They just want to argue, want to complain. They just want to lose, vent their anger. That's all. And then all these accusations recorded here. Please do not listen carefully of this. But because we are reading the Bible, that's why we should read into details of this. These words, they don't make sense. The accusation, no. Verse 4, why have you brought up the assembly of the Lord into this wilderness, and our animals, that we and our animals shall die here? All talk about death. Here he says, if only we had died when our brethren died before the Lord. And then he says, it's like accusation. Why did you bring us here so that we may die here? And then our animals would die here too. Chapter 19 talks about water of purification. Is to cleanse, purify those who become unclean because of the dead body. And today, the topic seems to go out of proportion. We die, our animals die, everyone died, everything died. They forgot about the command of the Lord. Why have you made us come up out of Egypt? It's like they were being forced to leave Egypt. Remember on the night that they killed, God sent a miracle to kill the firstborn. All the Egyptian men and livestock, if it's firstborn, all die. But the firstborn of the Israelites were preserved. When the time came, then when the time was full, then the whole Israelites left Egypt. No one forced them. No one forced them. They put the blood of the lamb over the threshold of the door, and then the angel of death passed them over with the blood over the threshold door frame. This is a salvation. It's not a compulsion. And why to bring us to this evil place? They call Kadesh an evil place. They're full of this complaint, grumbling. If you try to explain, no. If you try to explain one by one, no. I did not make you out of Egypt. I did not bring you to an evil place. Don't listen into detail. Don't explain point by point. But sometimes we argue with people point by point. You twisted. You are twisted here. You accuse me wrongly here. We just try to justify ourselves point by point. The more we explain, we muddled the water. The water will be cloudy and muddy. They talk like this because they were full of emotions. Not because they were being reasonable. They were not reasonable. Not because they were reasonable in their reasoning. So why do you want to justify point by point? It is not a place of grains or figs or wine or pomegranates, nor is there any water to drink. Verse 5. We're still on verse 5. They were wandering in the wilderness. Why would there be fig tree or vineyards? They think out of line totally. It's not a place for grain because it is a wilderness. It's not to plant anything. They were being punished by God. That's why they were wandering in the wilderness. And then he says, nor is there any water to drink. That's the only reason here. The real reason. But yet, we think, why, when Miriam died, they did not have water to drink? That means that for the 40 years in the wilderness, they always have water to drink. But when Miriam died, they didn't have water to drink. If you look at the Kadesh in the map, is the source of a river. That river's name is Wadi of Egypt. Wadi. W-A-D-I. That means basically it's Egyptian river dividing Egypt from the Palestine. Philistine and Egypt. It's a dividing river of Egypt and Philistine. Well, the river is seasonal. These kind of rivers are seasonal. It's not like Jordan River, they will have water all year round. This kind of river, Wadi of Egypt, it will have water when it rains. But there is no rain, it will be dried up. But why when Miriam died, then this river, no water? Why? How are they related? You know, Miriam, this word, this name, they only have one in Hebrew. Miriam and water, they only have one letter difference. Water means Miriam. And then Miriam is Miriam. The difference is only a R between these two words. These two words, yeah. Miriam died. Israelites got no water to drink. At such a time as that, once again, they complained. They did not appreciate the sadness, the grief that Moses and Aaron were going through. That's why Moses and Aaron lost temper before the people. God told him to speak to the rock, and yet he struck the rock twice and say that you rebellious people. This impression had been in the mind of Moses for a long, long time. They are stiff-necked. They are rebellious people. But this time, Moses really speak out what was on his mind. As leader, we are not supposed to say something like this. We are not to speak in our emotion. Because he was in the heat of his emotion, he just burst out and say, you rebellious people. I'm talking about verse 10. Hear now, you rebels. He basically called them the rebels without saying the content. So, in Moses, he was he was confused, full of emotion, sentiment, especially his older sister died. He didn't even have time to settle his grief, the sorrow he was going through. Now he had to face this complaint of the people. The enemy was cunning as usual. When you are going through the bereavement, here it caused a lot of strife and dispute. We experience that too. When you're about to get married, you will argue a lot. When you're about to hold a funeral, you argue all the time. A lot of you never settle the conflicts hidden in the family. When some major things happen, then the emotion, the anger bursts out. There is a Japanese movie talk about the funeral director. Many families got into arguments when preparing for funeral. The emotion cannot be suppressed anymore. Now people argue before Aaron and Moses. And they could not hold their emotion any longer. Facing such accusation, Moses and Aaron did not take notice of it. Verse 6, so Moses and Aaron went from the presence of the assembly to the door of the tabernacle of meeting, and they fell on their faces, and the glory of the Lord appeared to them. Moses and Aaron did not argue with them, quarrel with them, but they came before God, went to the tabernacle of meeting, and the glory of the Lord appeared to them. In the Bible, 4 times the glory of God appeared. Not talk about the cloud of God, no. The glory of God appears suddenly before the tabernacle of meeting. Every time he was trying to settle the dispute, we must trust that God would cover us. Do not argue or quarrel with the congregation. We know that God got our back. He is behind us. And the glory of the Lord appeared to Moses and Aaron. And God spoke to Moses, saying, take the rod. Take the rod. You and your brother Aaron gather the congregation together. Speak to the rock before their eyes, and you will yield its water. Thus you shall bring water for them out of the rock and give them drink. Give drink to the congregation and their animals. So the rock was placed in the Ark of Testimony. Aaron's rock, remember, but it's different from the before. It was a dry rod, remember? It did perform miracle. The rod would turn into snake and then turn into a rod. That's before Pharaoh, a dry rod. But this time, it actually will perform another miracle. The 12 tribes, remember, it sprouted, put forth buds, produced blossoms, and yield ripened almonds. What do you think the form of this rod? It's lifeless, but it actually completes the cycle of how almond was the growing process of an almond. So that's basically was in chapter 17 of Book of Numbers. We have no idea how it happened. How did you know that it sprouted, put forth buds, produced blossoms? How do you know that? Well, basically, you can only see the ripened almonds. You do not see the process of sprouting, putting forth buds. But you saw the ripened almond on the rod. And some rabbis actually speculated that actually on that rod there were sprouts, there were buds, there were blossoms, as well as the almonds, everything. That's why the people could say that. The full life cycle manifest on the rod is quite scary if you see it. It could be quite terrifying. A dry rod become like an authority, a sign of authority, a sign of life. But it was dry, it was lifeless. When the rod, it's dry. That's why you can use it. But now it turned into like a real almond tree, almond branch. This is a rod of miracle. God, we affirm the office of Aaron as the high priest. He was special. With this rod, there was life and authority. And verse 9, so they took the rod from before the Lord as he commanded him. And Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly together before the rock. Verse 10, and he said to them, so he said it in his anger, you rebels, hear now. Were they rebellious people? Certainly. But when Moses actually spoke it out and said of the people before their eyes, with that description, and strike the rock twice by his rod. For sure, he was in the heat of his emotion. There was anger in him. Yeah, water did gush out, for sure. Came out abundantly, and the congregation and the animal drank. Verse 11. From the part of doing, job done, finished. But from the being, it's a mess. It's a terrible mess. It's a big trouble. They failed, basically, in being. Job is done, but the person failed. Verse 12, then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, because you did not believe me, to hallow me in the eyes of the children of Israel. Verse 12, therefore, you shall not bring this assembly into the land which I have given them. It's such a sad judgment of God. Many people argue about the use of words on this. For Moses and Aaron, were there times that they did not believe in God? Do not strike the rock. Just speak to them. Speak to it, because you got the life and the authority of priest to speak to the rock. There is no need to strike the rock. And you did not hallow the Lord in the eyes of the children of Israel. They all despise and treat God with contempt. That's why you shall not bring this assembly into the land which I have given them. So explain why this was the water of Meribah, the water of quarrel, contention. Moses and Aaron did not argue, did not try to justify themselves. They did not justify it for themselves. And God did not further explain why they were not allowed to bring the people in. It's understood. If you understand the scenario, the setting, you understand the word of God. You knew what Moses and Aaron have done. Why didn't they argue, quarrel with God, hearing such judgment of God? In the past, when you heard of this story, you would try to justify and stood up for Moses, try to stand up for him and vindicate him. God should have let him go into the promised land. It's disrespecting God, basically. You don't know how serious this is, the matter. If you do not hallow the Lord in the eyes of people, we just take it lightly before. We take it lightly. No big deal. Why, God, you lose your temper and make such a hard decision, such a hard judgment? Why are you so harsh on Moses and Aaron? This generation could not enter into the land of Canaan. They were complaining and rebellious. Miriam could not enter. Aaron could not enter. At the end, even Moses couldn't. The outcome of the leaders and the people were the same. Verse 14 to 20, 21, they want to pass through the Edom. Now Moses sent messengers from Kadesh to the king of Edom. So they were ready, the whole people were ready to go into the land of Canaan. Would they go straight to past Edom or go past the outskirts of Edom? That means they were ready, getting ready to go into the land of Canaan. That's why they want to meet the king of Edom. Verse 14 to 20, verse 14 to 19. The conversation between the messengers from Moses with the king of Edom. So we know that the population was like 600,000 people. The men alone were 600,000. God really protect them. After 40 years, the old generation passed away. The old generation had witnessed the 10 plagues performed in Egypt. Those who walk on the dry land of Red Sea. But they could not enter into the promised land because they did not believe God. These were shocking, truly shocking miracles. But when it did happen, they could not believe God any longer. They did not believe that they will be able to go into the land of Canaan because they were giants. It was really self-defeating. They defeat themselves, basically. God wanted to bring them into the land of Canaan by His miracles, but they did not trust God enough. They reject going into the land of Canaan. That's why this generation must pass away. But these 600,000 men, it's not easy for them to pass through the land of Edom. It's not a small parade team. It's not a circuit going through the land of Edom. If they, go through your field, then your field may suffer loss. If they go through your river, your well, they may drink all your water. They need a guide to go through all the places. And intentionally, you may go into the field of others. You trample on the grain field of others. So it's definitely they need to send a messenger to go into the field. Even if the king of Edom had agreed to let them through, which he didn't, they would still need an escort guide to guide them through the journey. Otherwise, it will cause a lot of damage to the land of Edom. So king of Edom, refused their entry, refused their passing. And they say that the Israelites said, we will pay you back, we will give you money. Verse 19, so the children of Israel said to them, we'll go by the highway, and if I or my livestock drink any of your water, highway, that means that there is a path, there is a way. Verse 20, then he said, you shall not pass through. If you did pass through, then, I will come out against them with mighty men and strong hand. So Edom refused to give Israel passage through his territory. Verse 21. So Israel turned away from him. The wilderness is vast, as you can imagine. You can go through even if it's not highway. That's their only choice. So that's why their next station, Mount Hor, the last paragraph, verse 22 to 29, basically the third paragraph. Oh, sorry, 29. On this Mount Hor, verse 25, take Aaron and Eleazar his son and bring them up to Mount Hor. Strip Aaron of his garments and put them on Eleazar his son, for Aaron shall be gathered to his people and died there. Died on Mount Hor. According to Numbers chapter 33, and Aaron died at the age of 123. Lord, but God wanted Moses to bring Aaron up to the Mount Hor, but it's the last journey. That's what God wanted them to do. So Aaron died on Mount Hor, and Moses died on Mount Nebo. You need to go on your own last journey to face God. This is to pass on the sacred job. So he passed on his garment to Eleazar. In chapter 19 of book of Numbers, the ashes of the red heifer, it was done before Eleazar. So basically, Aaron at the time, he didn't have to do any actual work. The job itself has been passed on to Eleazar. But here is the formal handing over. The old generation leader passed away. The new generation leader shall arise. So Aaron died there, gathered to his people and died there. Now we jump to verse 29. Now, when all the congregation saw that Aaron was dead, all the house of Israel mourned for Aaron 30 days. Now they learned their lesson, finally. When Miriam died, they saw the fact that they did not have water to drink. They did not mourn for Miriam. But now when Aaron died, they mourned for Aaron 30 days. That's what happened on the 40th year when they came to Kadesh. Now turn to our PowerPoint. It's a paragraphing. Remember the title for today? Oh, okay. Now it's a map. That's the Sea of the Philistines. Then they came to the deserts of Paran and then Kadesh. Kadesh means sanctuary, holy temple. When they were camped in Kadesh, God had been with them. Do you see Wadi of Egypt there? Possibly not, but that's the Wadi of Egypt, means river of Egypt. They quarrel with Moses at the Wadi of Egypt. That's why it's also called Meribah, contention. And then they went to Mount Hor, and they walked past, they bypassed the land of Edom. Then they will go past Moab and went into the land of Canaan. What is this chapter telling us today, speaking to us? What is it trying to tell us? A generation passed away. God was going to take the new generation into the land of Canaan. Because of man's complaint, the old generation, the congregation cannot enter, the leaders cannot enter. Just like Psalm 90. Who knows the power of your anger? Basically, the Israelites were under the wrath of God. But God has given a lot of grace, kindness. In chapter 19, talk about the grace upon outside grace. And yet, men still complain against God. We may even try to vindicate Moses. Why couldn't he enter into the land of Canaan? God said, because Moses did not hallow me in the eyes of the children of Israel. As leader, please fear God in our heart. Sometimes we may transfer the complaint from others and we transfer it to God. It's never easy to be a leader. Most of the time, the complaint, do not take them too seriously and do not try to respond in details. If we read it in detail, we think that it's such a nonsense. But we must know how to seek God. We submit to God His will and His arrangement. This chapter is a bit sad, a bit miserable. But God is raising up the new generation leaders. May God give us faith so that we can continue to follow Him. Let's praise the Lord. That's the end of the message today.